Welcome to our Gender and Climate Change series. Today, we explore the unique vulnerabilities that climate change poses in populations across Kenya, Uganda, and Botswana. In 2023, these countries collaborated with the United Nations Development Programme and the Africa Group of Negotiators Expert Support, supported by the Gates Foundation, on a groundbreaking gender and climate change vulnerability hotspot mapping study. This research highlighted high-risk sectors in areas like water, agriculture, and nature-based tourism. Through this series, we'll engage top government officials and experts on climate resilience and the importance of gender-responsive actions and policies. Join us as we explore strategies to protect the most vulnerable. As we know, globally, women and men have different levels of vulnerability and resilience to climate change risks and its impacts. Vulnerabilities of men and women vary according to gender, but may also exist due to intersectionality with additional social identities such as ethnicity, religion, class, location, ability, education, and age. In April 2023, the government of Botswana, through the Department of Meteorological Services under the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, launched a Granular Gender and Climate Change Vulnerability Hotspot Mapping Study for decision support in Botswana. This project took a detailed look at areas most at risk from climate change impacts, focusing on the key economic sectors of agriculture, water, and nature-based tourism. This project was done in collaboration with the Department of Gender Affairs in the Ministry of Youth, Gender, Sport, and Culture, with the support of UNDP Botswana and the Africa Group of Negotiators Expert Support, Agnes Africa. Today, we delve into this recently concluded fascinating study aimed at generating sex disaggregated data that enabled identification of gender and climate change vulnerability hotspots to inform gender-responsive decision-making and policy development across the various sectors of the economy. To help us understand this important activity, I'm thrilled to have with us Ms. Chandapiwa Sebela. Ms. Sebela and her team have been coordinating the efforts on the Botswana government side to ensure that this activity achieves its objectives.
Thank you very much. My name is Chandapiwa Sebela, Director, Department of Meteorological Services. I'm so much happy to be part of these discussions here today. Thank you so very much.
Now to understanding the problem in Botswana. Climate change isn't just an environmental issue. It's a threat multiplier that disrupts entire systems. For this particular hotspot mapping exercise, the three sectors of focus were agriculture, water, and nature-based tourism. Kindly let us know what led to the selection of these three sectors, and also paint a picture for us on how climate change is affecting them to help us get a better view of the problem in Botswana.
Agriculture is a source of livelihood for the majority of our people, particularly those in rural areas, making it the backbone of the country's food security and economy. Farming households in Botswana rely on rain-fed agriculture, which is highly sensitive to climate change. It is also important to know that in Botswana, apart from agriculture, the population in rural areas also depends on the availability of natural resources such as the sale of firewood, thatching grass, and mopani worm, whose existence is affected by climate change since they depend on rainfall and other climatic factors. Water is another highly climate-sensitive sector in Botswana, with continuously growing water demand, with rapid urbanization, industrialization, and agricultural production. The changing rainfall patterns, amounts, and variability, and accelerating evapotranspiration with increased temperatures are creating water scarcity across the country. Botswana relies predominantly on underground water sources. Climate change poses challenges to these sectors, with erratic rainfall patterns, rising temperatures, and more frequent droughts threatening agricultural yields, water security, and growth in tourism. This creates a ripple effect, jeopardizing food security, livelihoods, and basic household needs. The problem is further compounded by existing gender inequalities. Botswana women farmers have limited access to land ownership, credit markets, and resources compared to their male counterparts. This makes it even harder for them to adapt to a changing climate and secure a sustainable livelihood.
The National Climate Change Coordinator and UNFCCC focal point, Mr. Balisi Khopolang, takes us through the expected impact through this granular gender and climate change hotspot mapping for decision support in Botswana.
So what I would want to say about the granular study, I must first from the onset acknowledge the fact that it happened. It's the first of its kind to ever happen here in this part of the country. And at the same time also acknowledging those who made it happen, and thanks to Agnes for that. As we go, I would also want to say I see this as a platform that could take us to another level. Where I'm coming from is the fact that you have to be optimistic to say the study is going to identify certain hotspots, or it identified some hotspots across the three areas, which is mainly agriculture, water, and ecosystem-based solutions. The reason why water for us is particularly important is because Botswana is a drought-prone country, and it's a dry country. So water, that's why our currency is called Pula. So now, identifying the hotspots across the three creates a situation whereby when you make interventions, they're going to be targeted to those. Because as you know, we don't have the luxury of having two rainfall seasons like other parts of the continent. It only rains once a year, from the late year into the early in the new year, so that's one rainy season. So now the absence of water to feed on the agriculture creates food insecurity, and therefore this study would not have come at a better time, because we see it as an opportunity to bring the three together and as to how we're going to create solutions targeting the three. The second mainstay of GDP earner to the country is tourism, after our mining, of course. Once upon a time, agriculture was way up there, but because of climate change, it fell. So now tourism, because of our free-ranging animals and the vast countries as big as about 600,000 square kilometers, with 40% for conservation, which means we prioritize tourism, and you see the rangeland has potential to sustain our biodiversity and wildlife for tourism. So now, obviously, having ecosystem-based approach, make sure that we're going to improve and our conservation laws and rules for the benefit of the communities. And actually, government has deliberate efforts whereby communities also benefit from this conservation. We have community-based natural resource management programs that are targeting to making sure communities are not left behind. So for us, it's a priority, because tourism, like I say, after minerals, brings in quite a sizable amount to our GDP.
The Granular Gender and Climate Change Vulnerability Hotspot Mapping for Decision Support in Botswana tackles these challenges head-on. Mr. Mukakapadi, can you tell us about the goal of this activity and who made it possible?
This activity's goal was to create a detailed picture of areas in Botswana that are mostly vulnerable to climate change. The most important factor here is that we consider not just environmental threats, but also social factors like gender and across all the three mentioned sectors. It was a truly collaborative effort. The Botswana government, in collaboration with Agnes, CG, ACRA, and CG Gender Impact Platform, all played key roles with the support from the Gates Foundation. Locally, we assembled a team with colleagues from the Department of Gender Affairs in the Ministry of Youth, Gender, Sports, Culture, and the NADI, and the United Nations Development Programme Country Office. By working together, we were able to provide expertise and resources to create a robust approach and a successful activity. The methodology itself is based on the IPCC Vulnerability Assessment Framework of 2007. This framework considered 3 key factors, that is, exposure to climate risk, sensitivity of the population to those risks, and their adaptive capacity. For each of these factors, we collected data at sub-national level, meaning we looked at specific districts within Botswana. Critically, we ensured this data was disaggregated by gender. This means we separated data for men and women, allowing us to understand how climate change impacts each group differently.
That breakdown of the project's goal and approach is very helpful. Let's deep dive into the activity, and to help us understand this technical process is a research scientist, Ms. Sewawa.
Since in this study we needed people with different skills and abilities, we had different people from different government departments and parastatals who formed part of this technical working group. We had people from Department of Gender Affairs, Department of Meteorological Services, UNDP, and NADI, National Agricultural Research and Development Institute. In this study, we used 2 phases to collect data, and the first phase was the secondary data collection. This phase involved gathering data from different government institutions and getting information from data sets which talked about climate change online. And then after we collected all this data, we used 3 different factors, which are exposure to climate risks, sensitivity, and adaptive capacity. And in exposure to climate risks, we analyzed trends in temperature, precipitation, and frequency of wet and dry days. And then after this, we came up with the exposure index for each district, and this helped to reveal the risk or the vulnerability of each district to climate change. The second factor was sensitivity. This index considered how susceptible sectors and communities are to climate change. For example, under agriculture, we looked at different key variables like percentage of land dedicated to agriculture, the number of agricultural households, the proportion of households that are led by women, and the percentage of female farmers in each district. The rationale behind this is when women are more involved in agricultural activities, they can be more susceptible or they can be more affected by changes in climate change. And then finally, we had adaptive capacity. This essentially explores how a sector or a community are able to adapt to the changes in climate. And then here we use proxies like gender gaps in health, income, education, and access to ICT services and finance. The reasoning is that with lower gaps in health, income, and education, women with better health, higher incomes, and more education are typically better equipped to handle the challenges brought on by climate change. Primary data collection formed the second phase of our data collection and analysis, and we call this the ground truthing stage, and this served as a validation of what we got from the secondary data analysis. This involved interviews with different district technical experts. We did mini interviews and focus group discussions with the Botswana community, capturing their experiences across the 3 sectors in 6 different villages. So this gave us an opportunity to hear the lived experiences of the community regarding climate change issues. To analyze this vast amount of data, we employed a statistical technique called principal component analysis. This helped us identify patterns and assign weights to the different variables within each sub-index. Ultimately, by combining the sub-indexes, you were able to calculate a final vulnerability index for each district in Botswana. It is important to note that climate parameters and adaptive capacity indicators were similar for all sectors. Sensitivity indicators were tailored or customized to each individual sector. Here's how we approached each sector, because we know that in Botswana, our main focus is agriculture, water, and tourism. So we chose those three sectors because we know that Botswana mostly depend on them. And then under agriculture, we analyzed trends in temperature, precipitation, and the frequency of wet days over time. And then for sensitivity, we looked at the percentage of land dedicated to agriculture, the number of agricultural households, and the proportion of female farmers who are involved in agriculture. And then underwater, we examined data on rainfall patterns, drought frequency, and groundwater levels to understand exposure to climate risks. For sensitivity, we looked at water supply and water demand, access to clean water sources and sanitation facilities, particularly in rural communities where women often bear the primary responsibility for water collection and management. And finally, under nature-based tourism, we examined the impact of rainfall and temperature patterns on the nature-based tourism and also explored the impact of climate change on the total protected area by recreational category, total water demand in the recreational area, and total wildlife aggregated using livestock standard unit for sensitivity.
Data collection is crucial, and sometimes you need to see things on the ground. The project incorporated elements of ground truthing. Could you tell us more about this?
While the secondary data is crucial in giving insights, going on to experiences on the ground through interaction with the communities, it presented a fascinating aspect to the study, which our team embarked on site visit to different locations that were identified as hotspot. These locations were situated in 6 districts, that is the Gauteng, the Kalahari North, the Gantsi, the Northwest, Northeast, and the Phalape districts. In those districts, we had interactions with different groups, which include women, men, and youth, and other community groups that reside in those localities. So through this interaction, we were able to assess sectors like agriculture, tourism, and the water sector to see how the identified hot spots locations fare in terms of the livelihood of those that result in those communities. For instance, we have women and men that are into farming practices that have showed some significant changes that are attributed to the climate impact, mainly on the unreliable rainfall and the persistent drought that is aggravated by excessive heat, which lead to a negative impact in their agricultural practices. Another aspect that we identify in most of this district was the water situation. Most of these locations that are deep in the zones that do not easily have potable water. For instance, in Gantsi, most of the water is underground water, which is mostly situated underground and brought up into the surface through the construction of the boreholes in order to do some practices like irrigation if that is possible, but from the assessment we noticed that not everyone, especially women and men that are into farming, they don't have the necessary resources, so that is the financial means to acquire or make boreholes that can support their agricultural practices. Then for tourism, we visited the northwest, which is the Ngami district in the Maung region, and we looked at the livelihood of the people there, which has drastically changed due to the lack of rainfalls that are there, which contributed to the drying of the rivers where the livelihoods were mostly centered around. So it is through this assessment that we are able to make some recommendation with regard to the interventions that are to be put in place for each of the district, because not every intervention that we come up with is kind of focused in just one area or all of them. So we have to identify some interventions that are specific to the region and to the impacts that are prevailing in those regions that were assessed.
And now on mapping and results, unveiling the hotspots. You have analyzed this wealth of data. Now what?
Now it comes to overlaying data in an interactive manner. For this, we are going to use the GIS tool that stands for the Geographic Information System, which is a tool that is used to overlay some conditions of the climate that was assessed from the secondary data, together with the national circumstances, that is the situational analysis on the ground that was sort of collected during our ground truthing exercise.
And so, are these maps available for the public to see?
Definitely. The interactive maps are available for the public consumption, and through the online services we are able to get on the website and access these interactive maps.
From this study, we're learning that the climate crisis is not gender neutral. Women and girls experience the greatest impacts of climate change, which amplifies existing gender inequalities and poses unique threats to their livelihoods, health, and safety. To engage with us on this segment is Ms. Oratile.
This study was a gender and climate change study, a first of its kind in our country, and as a Gender Affairs Department, we were happy to be part of it because often at times, gender is considered as a cross-cutting issue and it ends there. And thus, climate change is a threat multiplier, meaning that it escalates in the social, in the political, and the economic challenges. The Granular Gender and Climate Change Vulnerability Hotspot mapping revealed to us that both men and women have different levels of vulnerability and resilience to climate change risk and its impacts. And so the vulnerabilities for men and women vary according to their genders, but may also exist due to intersectionality and additional social identities such as ethnic, religion, the class, locality, availability, education, and age. In Botswana, we found out that while climate change adaptation needs are consistently high across districts, some districts have higher climate change adaptation needs in agriculture and water than other districts. Similarly, due to the variations in climate risk sensitivity and adaptive capacity across nature-based tourism areas, some locations are highly vulnerable and need more attention than other locations. This provided an interesting area for targeting women and climate change adaptation in agriculture, water, and nature-based tourism in Botswana. And so as we work towards mainstreaming The study found out that there was a need for policymakers and implementers training nationally and countrywide in various responsive gender approaches, including gender mainstreaming and climate change actions, and collection and analysis of sex disaggregated data to inform climate actions in agriculture, water, and nature-based tourism sectors. This will help us identify opportunities that would enhance gender equality and projects and harmonize the national and country climate change policies and programs to ensure gender is mainstreamed.
Botswana faces unique environmental challenges, from food security, water scarcity, to biodiversity loss as a result of climate change. This calls for collaboration, and the United Nations Development Programme in Botswana played a crucial role in this study. The Environment and Climate Change Programme Specialist, Ms. Chibinzani, joins us to share more in detail the importance of the Granular Gender and Climate Change Vulnerability Hotspot mapping to development partners.
First, let me start by saying the United Nations Development Programme country office in Botswana was very pleased to collaborate with the African Group of Negotiator Experts in supporting the government of Botswana through the Ministry of Environment and Tourism in their efforts in responding to issues of climate change. Botswana, as most of us know, is most exposed to challenges of climate change, with the mean temperature expected to continue outpacing the global average increase. Given the accelerating trajectories of climate change and escalating social inequalities, it is therefore critical to ensure that response measures are put in place, resources are catalyzed to implement innovative and impactful programs to address these challenges. We all know that the climate crisis is not gender neutral. Women and girls experience the greatest impacts of climate change, which amplifies existing gender inequalities and pose unique threats to their livelihoods, specifically health, food security, and safety. You asked about the importance of the Granular study to development partners. I believe that by leveraging the insights from the mapping exercise, development partners can make significant strides towards supporting government to achieve the SDGs. Of relevance to this study, SDG 1, 2, 5, 7, and 13. But also in addition, this study will help strengthen adaptive capacities of societies in the face of climate change. The study has also identified crucial intersections between gender and climate change, and I believe that equipped with this knowledge, development partners can tailor interventions to address the unique needs of affected communities, particularly women. This precision would definitely enhance effectiveness of our programs. The mapping exercise has also provided sex disaggregated data that can inform policy and funding decisions, ensuring that resources are really placed where they are mostly needed. This data-driven approach also will help partners to prioritize initiatives that promote gender equality and climate resilience. Furthermore, the mapping revealed subnational variances in climate risks and adaptation capacities, and development partners can therefore use these insights to design targeted interventions that consider local environmental, social, and economic dynamics. Also worth noting is that by highlighting areas of overlap between gender and climate issues, the mapping fosters collaboration amongst the critical stakeholders at a local community level, NGOs, civil society, youth-led groups, and local communities. So this collective approach can amplify impact and ensure comprehensive solutions. Lastly, the mapping also established indicators that can be used for tracking progress of our development interventions, and therefore providing opportunities to ensure that we track and monitor closely the effectiveness of these interventions and adjust strategies whenever needed.
On behalf of the Government of Botswana and the Ministry of Environment and Tourism, I would like to express sincere gratitude to the Africa Group of Negotiators Expert Support, AGNES, for funding the study, as well as other partners like the United Nations Development Programme, Botswana Office, the Africa Union Development Agency, Gates Foundation, CGIR, as well as the Department of Gender Affairs for their invaluable support during the development of the study. Thank you very much.
As we wrap up, I'd like to sincerely appreciate AGNES Africa for leading this transformative gender and climate change vulnerability hotspot mapping study, and other key contributors like the CGIAR ICRA, the UNDP Botswana, the Gates Foundation, the Gender Impact Platform, government officials and key technical experts, and the community. Your dedication is paving way for gender-responsive interventions and policies. To our audience, thank you so much for listening. If you'd like more information or to get involved, kindly visit the AGNES Africa website at agnesafrica.org. I've been your host, Angel Charlo.